So we call these cameras red light cameras,
Mhm.
but they get you on the yellow light.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
true.
On this
Okay.
episode of
So
Jen and Friends for State 48 News.
I feel like we're being set up to fail because it's a great way to generate money.
Today's guest is Jay Bieber. He's the Executive Director of Policy for the National Motorists Association.
Do you love what you do? Do you just love your job?
Most days.
Hi, Jay.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
As we start, can you tell me a little bit about you? How did you get interested in this line of work?
Oh,
And
jeez.
what do you do?
So I was living in California, in Los Angeles. I was working in the entertainment industry, and we had some downtime because there was a writer's strike. And I saw a story about red light cameras in Los Angeles. The reporter was saying how the red light cameras were causing more accidents, not less accidents. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. And then there was a follow-up story where the police came back and said that no, his information was not true, even though he got the information from the police. And so I have a science background. I was like, well, let me look. Let me see what's going on. So I got the data that they were arguing about, and I looked at it, and I did some research, and I found out that the red light camera program in Los Angeles was a giant scam, and that they were pretending, they were saying that there was all these benefits from it. When I looked into it, there wasn't this reduction in collision. In fact, the collision reductions that they were citing happened way before the cameras were actually put in, and it was already on a downward trend. And so I looked into all these things, and then I started to learn about yellow light times and how you can improve traffic safety through engineering, and started to understand about the dilemma zone and the indecision zone, all that kind of stuff. And eventually that led to, through my efforts, getting rid of the red light cameras in Los Angeles. And then it's been on from there since. So
Wow. Do
that's
you love what you do? Do you just love your job?
most days. I have to tell you that the biggest challenge, and it's really interesting, is like when you talk to people about this kind of stuff, it's frustrating because like you can talk to them and you can explain it to them, and they just don't want to hear you. Like they have their preset notions. They don't care what the data is. They don't care what the facts are. They either have some either philosophical predisposition to something with police officers, right? Like so some of the police folks, and not all the rank and file like these things, but with police officers, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So everything looks like an enforcement issue, right? So they don't want to hear about engineering and stuff like that for the most part. They just want to understand enforcement, and they're good at that. That's their job, right? So that elected officials, they have their own set of concerns, whether it's the budget or whether it's looking good and looking like they care about safety. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you give them. It's like, well, if I vote against these things, am I going to look like I don't care about safety, and therefore it's all that stuff. And you would like to believe that like facts and evidence would carry the day, but unfortunately it doesn't always do that. So
Do you think if people did look at the facts and really did listen to more of this, we'd have a different conversation today? Do
I
you think that we would have to have all these bills running through the legislature?
probably not. I think that most look, again, I'm an optimist, so I would like to believe that people can see the evidence and then make rational decisions for themselves. That's not always the case. But here's the thing about automated enforcement, which is, and I like to say this is really clear, is that the technology in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's how it's used. And that's really where the argument is. Yeah, do we want to be surveilled every day? No. I mean, would you want to be followed around by somebody with a camera all day long, just waiting for you to step out of line? And would you want to live in that kind of world? Would you want to live in a surveillance state where there's cameras everywhere, and the most minor transgression you get pinged for that, whether it's a fine or reduction in your social score or whatever it is in China? It's like I like to say this, like if you think cameras are a great thing and they should be everywhere, you will love North Korea, you will love China. you know, um, not so much in the
But we
United States.
don't want it here in Arizona.
No, but right, exactly. And so it's not really like a camera in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? Even a camera that captures a violation is not a bad thing. It's a question of how do we use it? How abusive is it? Do we do the engineering first? Do we try to make things as self-enforcing as possible so we don't have to ticket a whole bunch of people? Unfortunately, these types of systems, the automated systems, they create this perverse incentive to not fix the underlying problems and to just keep churning tickets. I mean, if you have a red light camera program for years and years and years, and you've kind of leveled off on your ticketing, you have a problem, right? Like it should be going down. Like theoretically, if it works, right, you shouldn't have lots and lots and lots of tickets still being issued. You should have very few tickets being issued because you've quote unquote changed people's behavior. If it's really about driver behavior, oftentimes it's not, and that's why you don't get down to almost nothing, because a lot of it is the underlying engineering and the flaws in the system, which these red light cameras and speed cameras exploit. And that's why you can never get to almost nothing, because if you were only ticketing the really dangerous drivers, the people who were outside the norm of everybody else, then you would be at almost nothing. It wouldn't be nothing, but it would be close to nothing, and you wouldn't generate a profit. So they don't want to do that.
I feel like Arizona drivers in any state that has this, I feel like we're being set up to fail
Yeah,
because it's a great way to generate money. Do you feel
it
that
is. There's so many examples of that. Like, so with red light cameras being set up to fail could very much look like having a yellow light time that isn't really sufficient for the speed of the traffic on the roadway, not adding in what we call engineering tolerance, because you can't have a perfect yellow light time. So you have to give sort of this leeway, this range of yellow light times that are appropriate, and then really only ticket people that are way outside of what's reasonable. So people are definitely set up to fail. With speed cameras, one of the ways people are set up to fail is that the government builds a road for, say, encourages people to drive at 45 miles an hour, right? And then they slap 35 miles an hour on the sign, and then they ticket people for doing exactly what they built the road to do. So this is why people are set up to fail. If you want people to drive at a certain speed, you got to build a road for that speed. You can't build a road for a different speed and then expect people to drive what you theoretically want them to drive on, even if you put a sign up there, because people don't look at every single sign that they pass. They drive holistically. They just drive what they feel is the natural, reasonable speed. Certainly there are people that are outliers, but for the most part, most people are just going from point A to point B, just doing what comes naturally based on what the built environment says to them. And when you start putting signs on the roadway that don't match that, you have a problem. You have a problem for enforcement, and you have a problem for people having confidence in the signs that they see every day. So they will start to disrespect the signs, because if, for example, if there's a speed limit sign that's ridiculously low, you're gonna be like, they're not serious about this. Like, this is not a serious thing. Same thing with too many stop signs, for example. You have too many stop signs, and they can see that you don't need this stop sign here. It's clear that this is the main road, and maybe the stop sign should be on the side road, but there's no real reason to have a stop sign here. People start disrespecting that kind of stuff. So we don't want to oversign things, because we want people to adhere to the signs that are really necessary.
So we call these cameras red light cameras,
Mm-hmm.
but they get you on the yellow light.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is true.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the situations here. We've got the straight through, we
Mm-hmm.
have the right turn, the left turn, and let's talk a little bit about the indecision zone.
Okay.
Where should we start?
Okay. Well, let's talk about the different kinds of red light running.
Okay.
So the first thing is that most people, when we say red light running, they think of one particular thing, which is people blowing through an intersection. The light has been red for a long time. There's cross traffic is maybe started up or about to start up. And that's a very dangerous situation. That's what people think about when they think about red light running. They don't think about somebody crossing the limit line by a tenth of a second, or, blink of an eye is 4/10 of a second. Okay. So they don't think about things you can't see with the naked eye. They don't think about, say, a right turn on red with your wheels and just not quite stopping. We call that a rolling right turn, or they used to call it California stop or something like that. So I don't know how it got that name, but anyway, so when you think about red light running, all of this stuff is lumped into the category of red light running. But what people, if you ask the average person, do you want to stop red light runners? They're thinking, I want to stop that guy that's blowing through the intersection way up the light is red, and maybe killing me and my family, or my loved ones, all that kind of stuff. So, but they're not thinking about, hey, there's a line of cars in the left-hand lane, and there's 10 cars and 9 cars get through before the light turns red, and that 10th car, their nose crosses right after that light turns red, but they're following through. They're not causing any problem or whatever. They're not blocking traffic. They're just following through the rest of the light. They're not thinking about that. Hey, that's a red light runner. But unfortunately, when you get into the automated systems, that's where most of the tickets are. It's for all of these little violations that really aren't dangerous things that people make mistakes on. And so it's the fraction of a second violations, it's the rolling right turns, it's the follow through violations on a left turn lane that where these tickets are being issued. But that's not what the average person really wants the cameras to be focused on, if they believe in the use of cameras at all. They want to stop that person who is blowing through late into the red. Now, I'll tell you a little secret. Those people who are blowing through late into the red, for the most part, are people who don't know the light is red. They're distracted, they're fatigued, they're impaired, something like that. The sun's in their eyes, whatever it is, okay? A camera is never going to stop that because they don't know the light's red. So what is the fear of getting a ticket going to do? They don't know the light is red. So we have to stop that kind of thing to stop the really dangerous red light running. A camera is never going to stop that thing. So really all a camera can do is ticket people who are making some of these minor violations. That's why cameras can't really, no matter what they tell you about the statistics, red light cameras really can't make an intersection much safer. They can ticket people who are distracted and blow through late. They can ticket those people, but they're not going to stop them. You can see that from the videos that the camera companies and the proponents of these systems like to show, where, oh my God, look at that person running through the red light, or they slammed into something. There was a camera there. It didn't stop them.
Yeah, exactly. I guess of the tickets they're given, the citations and these infractions, how many of them are really the serious ones that they're trying to stop?
If you look at the data, I would say maybe 1 to 2%.
Okay.
Right. So most of the red light camera companies, the vendors, can produce a chart and tell you how late into the red the violations are occurred. And we have plenty of this data from around the country, specifically California, where I used to be based. And you will see that almost all of the violations occur, maybe 50 to 80% occur within the first half a second or so of the light turning red. Like I said, blink of an eye is 0.4 of a second. So we're talking about literally within the blink of an eye is the vast majority. Then it really starts to quickly tail off. And so within 1 second, you're at probably 90, 95%. And usually it takes a second for the cross traffic to start up. And also at many locations, they have what they call an all red, which is at least a second. So you got 2 seconds before anybody theoretically is going to be in that intersection. So the dangerous red light running is usually 2 seconds or later. And even that's a short period of time, but that's way longer than what the camera can, the camera can pick up things at, 1/10 of a second. So, you're talking 20 increments later is where it starts to get dangerous. And that's where all the violations. So when we see that when you increase the yellow light time beyond the minimum that is often calculated through the formula that determines how long the yellow light time might be, or the minimum yellow light time, once you start extending beyond that, you start cutting off all of those fraction of a second violations. You could theoretically get your violations at an intersection down to maybe 10 or 20 a month.
But why wouldn't you just extend the yellow light times then?
Well, I would extend the yellow light times if I could wave a magic wand, and we try to encourage places to do that. But the main reason why they don't want to do it is actually two reasons. Number one, if you have a red light camera there, they want to generate the revenue. They want the revenue from the cameras. So if you extend the yellow light time, you are going to cut off your revenue source. So they don't want to do that. In fact, we have an example in Oakland, California, that had a red light camera program. And the engineers in that city extended the yellow light time by 1 second. Now, that's not really a long time. Think of it. Yeah. 1 second is pretty much like that, right? So they extended it by 1 second. Violations went down by like 80%, maybe 90%, right?
Wow.
So great. You would think everybody would be happy. You think everybody would be thrilled. They got nasty emails from the police department saying, what are you doing? Your extension of the yellow light time has impaired our ability to run this program, because they were counting, and they basically, we were counting on a particular yellow light time, and they didn't say, and to generate revenue, but it was ... You're impairing our ability to run this program. So they forced them to roll back the change. And of course, all the violations came back. Now, eventually they ended that program. We also found that during that period of time, when those yellow light times were longer, there were no collisions in those intersections. So you can improve safety by doing proper engineering.
First of all, tell me, what is the perfect yellow light time?
Okay, well, first of all, there is no such thing as a perfect yellow light time. So there is only a minimum yellow light time that doesn't absolutely force somebody to run the red light. That's called eliminating the dilemma zone, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. But beyond that, you can extend your yellow light time maybe up to a second longer, maybe even a second and a half longer than what the calculation is. And you will get an even greater benefit, because you'll get a lot of those mistaken violations will be eliminated as well. So, here's the thing, what people don't understand about yellow light time. Yellow light time is designed for those drivers who are too close to the intersection to stop when the light turns yellow, to make it into the intersection before the light turns red. That's what the yellow light time is designed to do. So it's a two-step process. Number one, if you're driving along at a particular speed, you have a particular speed, you have a particular reaction time. Everybody is a little bit different. You have what they call the deceleration, which is larger vehicles have a lower deceleration. It takes them more to decelerate, come to a stop. So you can use a formula, and if you knew what those parameters were for any particular person, you could calculate what that person's stopping distance is. And I'll just give you an example. So for somebody with a 1 second reaction time, if they decelerate at 10 feet per second every second, and they are traveling at 35 miles an hour, the stopping distance calculates out to 183 feet. Right? If you are closer than 183 feet when that light turns yellow, you should keep going, because you don't have enough roadway to stop. If you're behind that 183 feet, okay, you're further away, then you should stop. Of course, there's no line in the road that shows you where 183 feet is. And for everybody, that number is different, because your 1 second reaction time may be my 1.5 second reaction time. Or I may have a larger vehicle that doesn't slow down as easily. Or I may be traveling at 35 miles an hour, and you may be traveling at 37 miles an hour. So there's always a range of nothing's perfect. This is why there's no such thing as a perfect yellow light time. So number one, you have to get the parameters that go into the equation as close as possible to reasonable. Okay, and in engineering, we say that there's a thing called tolerance, which means that if I have, let's say my range of reaction times is somewhere between, say 1 second to 2 seconds, okay? That's a range of possibilities that drivers could reasonably have on the roadway. You don't want to set it for 1 second, you want to set it for 2 seconds to make sure that the people who are reasonable but have a longer reaction time, and sometimes that longer reaction time is not based on the person, it's based on the situation. For example, you don't see the yellow light time turn on exactly when it turns on because there's a big truck in front of you. Or it's you're passing underneath a bridge, or like there's all these reasons why it's just not perfect, okay? But even if you were able to get that number perfect, okay, like let's say for a particular driver, you got a long enough yellow light time. You know what, we did actually explain that once you have that distance, you have to give people the time it takes to cross that distance before the light turns red. So when that light turns red, is going to be when you start capturing violations. And so you don't want to turn that light red before that person has a reasonable time to get into the intersection, because then you create what I mentioned earlier, which is a dilemma zone, which is where a place in the roadway, when that light turns yellow, you neither have enough roadway to stop, or you don't have enough yellow light time to get into the intersection. You're basically entrapping people. So that is possible. And it's also, as I mentioned, that yellow light time, it's not perfect. So for one person, you could have a dilemma zone, a different person doesn't have a dilemma zone at that intersection. It's all a range.
Tell me, what do I do? I'm approaching an intersection. What are my choices? And what are the good choices in those situations?
Okay. Here's the interesting thing. Most people actually have experienced this in their life. Anytime you drive out on the road, you approach an intersection, light turns yellow. If you are far away from that intersection when that light turns yellow, your decision is really easy. You're going to stop. Just, you don't have a death wish. No one's, this is not the situation where, you're like, I'm so far away, but I'm still going to gun it and try to make it. You're not going to make it. Okay. So far away, you're going to stop. No problem. If you're really close to the intersection and the light turns yellow, you don't have enough roadway to stop. You're going to keep going. And you've all experienced this. The problem arises in this middle ground, the place that we call the indecision zone. Everybody has experienced this, which is the light turns yellow and you're not sure whether the right thing to do is to stop or to go. If you stop, okay, maybe somebody rear-ends you, or you stop before the light turns red and you stop at the intersection and somebody slams into you because they're not expecting you to stop. Okay, so always stopping is not the right choice, right? You got that freight liner behind you. You don't want to stop if you think he's not going to stop. And a truck, he has a longer stopping distance. So you got to be careful, okay? Because again, no perfect yellow light time. So you got to be careful of who's behind you. If you, so stopping isn't always the right choice. Going isn't always the right choice. So sometimes you're far enough back where you should have stopped, but you weren't quite sure where that place was. And so you violate the red light by, again, a fraction of a second. That's why we say that you've got to create tolerance within the yellow light timing system in order to not just base your yellow light time at the absolute minimum based on the posted speed limit, which nobody drives at, because usually the posted speed limit is way too low for the way the roadway is built. People just drive the way the roadway is designed. And so you're supposed to set your yellow light time based on the actual prevailing speed of traffic, not some imaginary number on the sign. And the reason that we do this, by the way, the reason that we don't want people to run red lights is not necessarily, hey, we don't want them to get tickets. Now, of course, we don't want people to get tickets unreasonably. However, you want to protect the other people in the intersection, the cross traffic, the pedestrians and all. So why would you, as an engineer or as a politician, say, we're going to set the yellow light time at the absolute minimum and know that a certain percentage of people are going to run the red light and put other people in danger? You're negligent if you do that. So forget red light cameras, forget the ticketing. You want that tolerance in there for safety. That's a safety margin. We don't build a bridge in order to hold up the absolute traffic that we think is going to be on that bridge every day. We always build in tolerance in case something happens. There's a bunch of larger vehicles at one time. If you have earthquake standards, like I said, I lived in California. We don't build earthquake standards to what we think the earthquake is going to be. We build it much higher because what if there's a much bigger earthquake? It's the same sort of concept. And so with the yellow light time, you want to make sure you have a long enough yellow light time. Now, you asked me, why don't people extend this yellow light time? So we can answer that question now that we kind of understand it. Okay, number one, there's a revenue generation thing. There's a perverse incentive not to fix the underlying problem. The other thing is that some engineers mistakenly believe that yellow light time is lost time. So they have to keep traffic moving. They don't want to have congestion. So they think, well, if I put in an extra half a second, I'm losing time at the intersection for the what they call throughput, right? Now, that's not actually true. It's a misnomer because people will use that yellow light time. So you are getting throughput, but they think it's lost time. So that's one reason why, because engineers are under pressure to balance this. I need to have enough throughput, but I also need to give people enough yellow light time. So there's this balancing act, right? But yellow light time is not lost time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there is this mistaken belief that if you extend the yellow light time, drivers will somehow notice this and that they will adjust their driving so they're going to run the red light anyway. We hear this all the time. This is absolutely 100% not true. It is a complete fallacy. It has been proven over and over and over again to be false. There was a study done for the city of Phoenix recently that proved this from, I believe, ASU. They were actually hired to study longer yellow light times in the city of Phoenix. And they found that not only did those longer yellow light times reduce the number of red light runners at those intersections, they also found that the drivers did not adjust to that over time. So that's number one. We have a 2-year study from an intersection in California where after 2 years, after violations went down with a longer yellow light time by like 80%, those violations did not come back. So we know that by extending the yellow light time, we can have a safer intersection, and also we don't have to ticket as many people as we're ticketing. However, if you're dependent on the money from the system and you don't want the system to cost you anything, or you want to make money from the system, you don't want that fix. You want as many tickets to keep churning as possible.
Let's talk about school zones.
Okay.
In the hearings this week, I've been watching every single meeting, and school zones come up. This is the big reason why they really want to keep photo radar in Arizona and to be able to expand it. Tell me, what is the law in Arizona with school zones, and why is it a great moneymaker?
Okay, well, first of all, it's always a good political thing to say that you're out there trying to save children. Okay, so if you have something that's completely unpopular and people recognize it as abusive, all you got to do is say, "But we're doing it for the children." So we're doing it to save children. Who doesn't want to save children? So that's the first thing. So anytime anybody starts pulling out the "I want to save children" card, I would be a little bit suspect. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that the problem with school zones in Arizona is the fact that, at least theoretically, they are in effect 24/7. So even when kids are not going to and from schools, theoretically, you could run a camera program and you could ticket people for, violating this 15-mile-an-hour school zone at times when there's no kids around and there's nobody to be crossing the street, and you don't need a lower speed limit. But because the law is written this way, you can now take advantage of that and put in a camera and ticket people who are simply driving by the school at the natural speed of the roadway, that speed that at all other times it would be perfectly safe for them to drive by. But just because it's a school day and there's a bunch of kids inside a building near the roadway somewhere, then we can ticket them for these violations. And that's why if somebody claims they're doing it for the children, then they better just be ticketing people in that half hour before school starts and a half hour after school ends, and only on roadways where there's no safe place for kids to cross the street, where there's a crossing guard or whatever, not someplace where there's let's say there's a traffic signal or a stop sign where people are going to stop and the kids can cross the street. School zones are really only supposed to be for slowing people down where kids don't have a protected place to cross the street. Now, I know we've expanded that over the years. I am under no illusions that the legislature is going to change these rules, but certainly any entity that is running a speed camera program near schools, they should really only be ticketing people, if they're ticketing them at all, for the half hour, when kids are going to school and crossing the street in an unprotected place by the school. I can point out a lot of places around the valley where there are plenty of schools where the speed limit theoretically would be 15 miles an hour, and it's the middle of the day and nobody even knows if school is in session. And that's the problem. So one of the things that you could do, again, if you wanted to, and you wanted to actually be fair to drivers, is, and now they do put these little things in the roadway that say 15 miles an hour and whatnot. But if you really want to get a driver's attention, you use what's called a flashing beacon, which means that there's a sign and it says the school zone is 15 miles an hour when flashing. And then there's 2 flashing lights on top and bottom, and you're getting somebody's attention. And then you couple that with a speed feedback sign. That's the sign that says where speed is. If you want people to comply, if the goal is to get people to comply, why wouldn't you do as much as possible to get people to comply in the first place, rather than having to rely on a ticketing system where they get a ticket weeks or maybe even months later in the mail and then say, oh, I did something wrong. Next time I'm going to, you want people to obey at that moment where the kids are when they're actually crossing the street. So why wouldn't you put in these systems? But they don't do it because they want the ticketing.
Do you feel that these systems kind of put police in an awkward situation? I mean, their duty is to enforce the law, right? And to keep us safe. But in the same respect, they also want to have a good rapport with the people in their communities. And when you have this kind of technology that's catching people, I mean, it's really kind of preying on you to make a bad decision more than really intentionally breaking the law. Do police officers really enjoy having this system in their communities?
I will tell you, this is a dirty little secret, that most of the rank and file police officers don't like these systems. You'll hear a lot of times with the police unions or the police, especially the police brass, like the captains and whatever, because they're worried about the budget, right? And they may be, oh, well, this will help fund, additional police officers or whatever. Okay, so that's what they're worried about, right? And that's a good thing. You want more police officers, great. But the rank and file recognize that this is actually bad PR for them. We have a lot of problems with people, being mad at the police for various reasons, and some of it is justified and some of it isn't. However, okay, why would you create a system in which people recognize they're being treated unfairly and then have the cops to blame for this, right? Because the cops are the ones that are, maybe even, the police department is issuing the ticket. The police, if you're challenging it, they show up in court and tell everybody what a horrible person you are because you made a rolling right turn at 2 o'clock in the morning with nobody around, or you violated by a fraction of a second, which if a police officer were out on the street, he couldn't even perceive it with his naked eye. But, they're telling you how dangerous you are. Like, people, and that's their job, okay? That's what they're being forced to do, but oftentimes they don't like it. And we need to have trust in our institutions. And this is part of the problem with these automated systems, is that they really break down the trust that the public has for policing, for elected officials, for our judges, for anybody involved in this thing. And it's unfairly tagged on the police because they're the ones that are being forced to do this. It's like a police officer, they tell them, go out there and ticket every little person that, whose wheels don't quite stop turning at a stop sign. Like, what police officer signed up for this, right?
Yeah.
They're out to try to catch the bad guys. But, sometimes they're assigned to do these, silly little traffic enforcement things because they want to prove to the community that, somebody, an elected official or somebody, high up in the department says, I want to prove that we're doing something to save people's lives, when of course, none of this is saving people's lives. So, so it's actually really bad for the police. Here's another thing, which I would think that the police would be, rank and file folks, I think should be really angry about, is they often compare, they say that this is a force multiplier. Okay, well, a camera is not a police officer, so you're not multiplying your force. Okay, in fact, they often say, they'll say something like, okay, well, if you had a police officer out at this street for 24/7, and the cost of that of a police officer, it's so much cheaper to have a camera out there. Well, a camera's not a police officer. A camera's not trained. They're not doing anything other than issuing tickets. And I don't think any police officer who wants to be seen as, and their job be, I'm a ticketing machine. Okay, that's not why people signed up to be police officers. And once you start automating this process, all judgment goes out the window. A lot of times they will say, you know what, everything is reviewed by a police officer. Well, if you've ever sat and watched the review, as I have, okay, and what the review is, oh yeah, that's a violation, click the mouse. Yes, that's a violation. I mean, that is not the same type of discretion that happens on the street when a police officer sees something, goes, that's not really worth worrying about, or or I'm going to go talk to that person and explain what they did wrong and give them a warning or whatever. That doesn't happen with automated systems. It's just basically somebody collecting a salary, sitting behind a desk, clicking a mouse all day. And the guys that have that job, they may like these systems, right? Because they don't have to be out on the street with the bad guys. They're collecting their salary, they're going to collect a great pension, and they're clicking a mouse all day. Now, That's not the majority of police officers, but there are people that, kind of get these cushy jobs and they like them. So you may see those people show up and say that they like them. But the rank and file guys, the ones that are out on the street risking their lives for us every day, they don't like these things.
Let's talk about the money. So here, let's talk about money. So here in Arizona, there are two bills, one to expand photo radar, one to ban it, and then the resolution to let the people decide. And the more I learn about this, it's crazy to me. But I feel like that the state and these cities really rely on the revenue. Now the cities say, we don't even know how much we're collecting, and no, it's not about revenue, it's about safety. Then why are they so adamant about being able to expand this and keep this in their cities?
So here's the thing. We always hear from the cities, from the politicians, and they always say it's not about revenue. In fact, we wish we never had to issue a ticket. We wish people's behavior changed and there were never any violations. Well, of course, they know that's never going to happen because most of these are technical violations that are not really intentional. So they know that's not going to happen. But even in places where we have been successful in changing the law, so for example, they don't get to keep the entity that's running the system doesn't get to keep the revenue, okay? Or or we've extended the yellow light times and most of the violations go away and they start running a deficit. When the money doesn't show up or goes away, they end these programs pretty quickly. And so this belies the claim that it's all about safety and we don't care. We don't care about issuing tickets and how many tickets we issue, because in almost every instance that we've ever looked at anywhere in the country, once the money goes away, they end the program because they don't want to pay for it. It's somehow all of a sudden that safety claim goes out the window. And this is exactly what happened with the city of Phoenix. And we should probably tell the story if there's time for it, which is that city of Phoenix ended their red light and speed camera program in I believe it was in 2020 during the pandemic. And so what was happening was the red light cameras were not generating enough revenue to pay for the overall contract. So they had to rely on the speed cameras, especially at the school zones, in order to supplement that and make sure that there was enough revenue overall coming in to pay for the contract. During the pandemic, schools were closed. So they didn't have this revenue anymore from the speed cameras by the schools. So they were losing money on the program and they ended up ending the program. Now, again, what happened to, this is all about safety and, we need these red light cameras everywhere because people are, terrible drivers and we need to stop them from running red lights and killing people. Oh, wait, we're not making enough money off of the school zone cameras anymore. So now we have to end the whole program, right? So, I mean, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It's a revenue generation program, no matter what they say. And here's how they can prove it. Okay, any additional revenue beyond the cost of running the program, they should voluntarily give up, not use it for something in the city or whatever. I challenge any city that says it's not about the revenue, donate that revenue to some, maybe to the state for, say, for the state safety program, so it's not directly tied to your jurisdiction. They will never do it. In fact, they will argue the opposite. Oh, we need it for traffic calming. We need it for all these other things. It's like if it's really not about the money, give up the money, but they won't do it.
What shocked me the most about all this is we got a $350 ticket. Mm-hmm. And then you have the little fees and surcharges on top of it. And right. Oh, by the way, they're going to clean elections that go into the coffers of the candidates who want to run for office again.
Right.
Now, you can scream all day long about constitutional issues and is it right? Is this ethical that the money is going to the lawmakers' campaigns? I mean, that's what gets me on.
Yeah, my understanding is that this clean money, clean campaigns thing is funded partially by automated enforcement tickets. That's a bad idea. Okay, that's just a bad idea. It's a bad look. Okay, I mean, at the very least, even if it isn't unethical, it doesn't smell right. right? And people, the public is not stupid, okay? So like, there may be some stupid people out there, but the vast majority of people can see what's going on, right? And they're like, wait a minute, you're taking the money from the red light cameras and the speed cameras, and that's helping fund your campaigns. And now you're out here saying we don't want to get rid of these things. I'm not going to accuse anybody of doing anything, improper or illegal or immoral, but I mean, even just the hint of impropriety is enough to say you shouldn't be doing that. And again,
and they're banking on you just paying the ticket, right? They don't
yes,
really want you to fight it. They don't really
no,
want you, no.
they would rather you just roll over, give them the money, because that's what this is about. This is about collecting money. Now, are there some people out there that believe you're a bad person because you ran the red light by 0.2 of a second and you should have stopped? Maybe there are people that believe this, but I mean, that's not really the society I'm going to live in which you're followed around all day with a camera, and the most minor mistakes get a $350 ticket or whatever it is. So we have to give people a little bit of grace here, and we have to be able to say people make mistakes. This is why one of the things that we advocate for is if you're going to do one of these programs, the first ticket, unless it's an incredibly egregious violation, the first ticket should be a warning. But again, they can't make money off of a system that does that, so they won't do it.
Why would something that seems like such common sense to you and me, why does that fall on party lines? Why are we finding, why has this become a right and a left issue?
It's interesting that it doesn't always fall as a right or left issue. It's like, so for example, there are certain states and certain places around the country where the folks that are against this, and this is actually was true in the city of Phoenix, there were people who were about as far left as you can get, okay? And they didn't like these programs either because they recognized that they were really abusive to, people who are in minority communities, people who don't have as much money, who you get one of these tickets that could be your rent for the entire month or your entire day's pay or whatever it is. So, they recognize how abusive this is to the folks that they care about, which is the downtrodden. And so, the people of lesser means are the people they're out there trying to protect. So it doesn't always fall along party lines. You would think, and it's interesting, you would think, and this is what I thought when I got into this, which is, the Republicans would be more the law and order folks, and they would love these things. But because there's a question about, personal freedom, and there's a question of the government not overreaching, so that falls into that category for Republicans. For some Democrats, it falls into the category of, treating, people of color or people with lesser means unfairly. So they care about that. And so there is sometimes a lot of crossover. The people who tend to like these systems are the ones that are concerned about the revenue. And I think right now what we're seeing in our society, when you look at who's in favor of higher taxes, usually it's folks that are Democrat, liberal side, because they think the money's going to be used for something good for the government and all these wonderful programs. And I'm not going to get into that question, but that's generally, collecting money and having the government do a lot of things generally falls as more of a sort of democratic liberal thing. And smaller government, less intrusion in your life, tends to be more Republican. Okay, not across the board. I'm talking absolutes, but that's just generally how it tends to shake out. And that's, and that's why we never know where the support for our point of view is going to come from, to be quite honest with you.
So from what I understand, lawmakers and everyone, they're really open to all of your ideas and suggestions, and we're wrapping up these cameras and getting rid of them and doing the right thing, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. We're
Tell me about
as my grandmother used to say, from your mouth to God's ears. Here's the thing. I think there's a portion of the populace out there, the elected class, who are making these decisions, who, if they really understood this, would probably see the light and say, you know what, either we can do this better, or maybe we should try something else. And there are a lot of times when we've seen that happen once we've explained this kind of stuff to them. Unfortunately, I've explained this to the council members of the city of Phoenix before they decided to, recreate their automated enforcement program, which is, coming up sometime in this year or whatever. And it sort of falls on deaf ears, right? Because the virtue signaling of we have to do something for traffic safety, we have to save a bunch of lives. It's easier to get elected on that in certain areas than it is to get elected with, hey, we're going to protect your privacy. Hey, we're not going to ticket you as much. We're going to be fair to you. Oh, why are you being fair to all those, terrible drivers and red light run? It's very easy to demagogue on this issue. So unfortunately, even if they understand it, sometimes it doesn't translate into good policy. And there are some people that are just sort of ideologically opposed to people driving cars. So there's that, And so they're like anything that's bad for car drivers and driving cars is a good thing because that maybe people won't drive their cars so much. So there's part of that in there as well. So I'm not saying that's the entire thing, but look, I'll give you City of Phoenix. The Republican members of the city of Phoenix on the city council that are very gung ho in pushing this automated enforcement program, and then there are people who are on the more liberal side who are against it. So it's not as cut and dry. Here's the thing. I'll throw this out there. Anybody watching this who thinks this is a good idea, I'll challenge you to debate anytime, anywhere. Okay, maybe your news organization will host
State 48 News, we will host it.
Okay, but I guarantee you nobody takes me up on this offer. Guaranteed, because they're afraid. They're afraid that the truth will come out and they're afraid that the scam will be exposed. And, look, we'll have a debate. It'll be a nice debate. We're all, we can all be, cordial and everything. This is not this has not been I've been railing against people, whatever. We're bringing out the negative aspects of it. But, I'll challenge you, anybody, anytime, we'll debate.
What are your thoughts on these two bills and the resolution? What do you think happens?
The bill will be passed to go to the governor's desk and she will veto it. The resolution, I hope, goes to the people. It did not get there last year. And we can talk about the difference between, even though they're exactly the same bill, why that is.
Yeah.
I don't see movement on the bill to expand the photo enforcement. I just don't see the votes being there based on the votes on the other bills, which also already have been voted on. So I'm hoping that that's the case. I don't see the appetite in the Republican legislature to get this bill to the governor's desk. But having said that, there are people that are very willing to vote for a bill to get rid of red light cameras when they know full well that the governor is going to veto it. Mm-hmm. When it comes to putting it in front of the people, maybe they're not so hot on giving the people their choice. So again, if you voted for the first bill, vote for the second bill, okay, and prove that there's consistency here, that it's the right thing to do. Give the people a choice and let people decide. And they should do this, within the individual cities, whether it's, Paradise Valley, who comes out all the time and saying, our people love this. Put it to a vote. We'll see what happens. I challenge you. Put it to a vote of the people and see if your constituents really actually want this when it's voting. You can go out there and do all kinds of polls that you want and do push polls and make the questions so that they come out a certain way. The real test is when people vote, and in almost every single case, save one or two around the country, when these have been put to a vote, they've been voted out. So it just tells you that people do not like these. They may think they like them, but you know what happens? Once these programs get into place, they realize they're the ones getting the tickets, and they don't like them so much. And usually it's for minor things that they never intended to do wrong. Arizona is unique in where you need to stop for the red light. And this is a weird thing. In most states, and I think most people would think this if they're going towards an intersection, is there's what we call the limit line. The limit line is either the line that's painted before the first line of the crosswalk, or it is the first line of the crosswalk. Most places around the country, that's where you have to stop. If you cross that line before the light turns red, you're good to go. You don't get a ticket, okay? Arizona has a weird thing, and I don't know why this is in in Arizona, but the place that you have to stop is into the intersection, what they call the extension of the curb, okay? So it's probably another, depending on the intersection, 10, 15, 20 feet out that you have to get to before that light turns red. And so that little difference could be half a second or so, depending on the speed of the roadway. And so the yellow light time has to be a half a second longer, or you get kind of cheated about a half a second in your yellow light time. If you only had to cross the limit line, which is where most people you would think you have to stop, because you don't want people to stop in the crosswalk and block the crosswalk traffic. So you're like damned if you do and damned if you don't, because if you stop on, in the crosswalk, you're blocking the crosswalk, so that's a violation. And if you don't get all the way into the intersection because you don't have enough yellow light time, then you get a red light ticket if they're there. So they know this. This is not a secret to the folks that run these programs. It's not a secret to the vendors. They know this. This is how they generate their money. If they did this fairly, they would not be able to generate money. But they don't want to do it fairly, because what they really want is they want the revenue. And that's been proven time and time again. There's ways for them to prove me wrong. I guarantee they will not do
it. So much to take in.
Yeah. So now you know more than 99.999% of the world in terms of traffic signal timing and red light running and speed cameras and all that kind of stuff.
Well, every time I see a yellow light now, I'll think of you, right? I'll be like, do I go? Do I stop?
Do I go? Should I stay or should I go now? I'm the executive director for the National Motorists Association. That's my job. My job is to explain this to people every day, and amongst other things. We're based in Wisconsin, but I'm here in Arizona, the executive director of policy for the National Motorists Association. So if people are interested in the organization, to go to motorist.org, and they can find out about red light running, reasonable speed limits, all that kind of stuff. And we even have helpful little thing, which is if you go to our website, something pops up and you can download for free a little article that we wrote, and it will help you to not get pulled over by the police, and if you do get pulled over by the police, what to do and say, so that interaction comes out as positively as possible.
My indecision zone. I didn't know.
Exactly. It's not that specific, but it is about how to talk reasonably to the police, not get them upset at you, and possibly not get a ticket.
Okay.
If you do get pulled over.
I just have learned so much today. Thank you so much for your time. So nice to meet you.
Same here. Okay, I'll keep talking for an hour. We keep going.
I know, me too.
So,